A 23-year-old nurse hiding a secret military past that could land her in prison. A high-value Special Forces operative bleeding out in her trauma bay from 38 separate bullet wounds. And her arrogant by-the-book boss who just ordered her to stop compressions and let the man die. She has a choice. Obey the doctor and protect her secret, or expose everything she is to perform a procedure she isn't licensed for and save his life. This is the story of that impossible choice and what happened 24 hours after it cost her everything. The evening air at Grady Memorial Hospital was thick, a familiar heavy blanket woven from the smells of industrial floor wax, stale coffee, and the sharp, sterile tang of antiseptic. On a humid Thursday night in Atlanta, the fluorescent lights of the trauma unit buzzed with an irritating high-pitched whine, each one casting a sickly pale green glow on the scuffed linoleum floors. It was a light that made everyone look ill, even the healthy. Jasmine Carter, at 23, was the youngest RN in the unit, and she moved with an unnatural economical precision that unsettled her older colleagues. She was restocking a crash cart, her hands flying over the plastic-wrapped syringes and intubation kits, her movements less like a nurse and more like a quartermaster's, each action logged, counted, and verified. This was her purgatory. This was her hiding place. Every beep of a stable monitor, every squeak of a gurney wheel, every inane request for a warm blanket was a reminder of what she'd lost, or more accurately, what she'd thrown away. The 68W SOCM Special Operations Combat Medic. The $2 million of training the 3rd Special Forces Group had poured into her. She could set a chest tube in the dark in the back of a blacked-out helicopter under fire with the wind trying to steal the equipment from her hands. She could run a walking blood bank with 6 soldiers, a roll of duct tape, and a grim prayer. Here she was told to fetch ice chips and change bedpans. The sheer grinding boredom was the worst part. It was an itch under her skin, a coiling energy in her gut that had no outlet. She missed the weight of her gear, the comforting pressure of her aid bag. She missed the dry, hot air of Afghanistan, the smell of dust, hot metal, and the distant acrid scent of burning diesel. She missed the absolute terrifying clarity of knowing that every second mattered. Here the seconds just dripped away, measured by the slow, agonizing drip of a saline bag. She was a high-performance engine stuck in neutral, and she was terrified one day she'd forget how to shift into gear. "Carter, you're going to wear a hole in that cart. Take a breath before you burn out." Jasmine looked up, blinking, pulled from her thoughts. Patricia Washington, the charge nurse, stood with her arms crossed, her face a mask of pragmatic exhaustion. Patricia was a good nurse, the kind who measured her day in coffee spoons and quiet victories. She was also the only one who seemed to see the coiled spring inside Jasmine. "Just making sure it's right, Patricia," Jasmine said, her voice quiet, flat. "It's been right for the last 2 hours, Jasmine," Patricia countered, not unkindly. "You check your supplies like you're packing a parachute. Go check on the drunk in Bay 3. He's starting to sober up, which means he's starting to get loud." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "This is my life now." She thought of her last field instructor, Sergeant First Class Davis. "Carter," he'd yelled, his voice raw from the rotor wash, "you are a scalpel in a world of hammers. You do not get to be dull." Now she was being sent to babysit a drunk. "On it," she said, her voice betraying nothing. A sudden jarring tone cut through the ER's ambient noise. It wasn't the intercom. It was the red priority phone, the one that rarely rang. Patricia snatched it up. "ER, Washington. Yes, I understand. How many?" "Oh, God. Okay, we're on it." She slammed the phone down, her professional exhaustion vanishing, replaced by the sharp-edged energy of a commander. "Listen up, people. Multi-car pileup on I-85. Black ice on the road. They're calling it a mass casualty event. Level 1. 7 critical, 12 walking wounded. EMS is 5 minutes out with the first. I want every bay prepped and somebody get Henderson." The ER exploded. The bored, shuffling energy vanished, replaced by a frantic, high-strung readiness. Doors hissed open. Carts rattled. Dr. Monica Pierce, a second-year resident, began nervously laying out surgical trays, her hands already shaking. Jasmine just felt a switch flip. The boredom evaporated, replaced by a cold, familiar focus. The itch was gone. The whoosh of the ambulance bay doors brought in a gust of cold, rain-soaked air that smelled of exhaust fumes and wet pavement. The first gurney slammed through the doors, wheels skittering on the wet floor. Male, 40s, driver, crushed chest, paradoxical breathing, sats are dropping, he's in and out. Dr. Marcus Henderson, the chief attending of trauma surgery, strode into the bay as if answering a curtain call. He was a man who wore his authority like a tailored suit, expensive, sharp, and designed to make everyone else feel small. He loved the title, the white coat, the godlike power of the trauma bay. He pointed, a general directing his troops. Bay 1, Pierce, you're with me. Carter, you assist. Let's move, move, move. The man on the gurney was a frightening shade of blue-gray. He was gasping, his chest moving in the worst possible way, sucking in when he exhaled, pushing out when he tried to inhale. A classic severe flail chest. His ribs were a broken basket. He needs a tube now, Henderson barked, already grabbing a laryngoscope. And get me a chest tray. Pierce, you're inserting. Dr. Pierce nodded, her face pale and slick with a fine sheen of sweat. She grabbed the scalpel, her hands visibly trembling. The patient's oxygen saturation monitor began to blare a desperate falling alarm. Beep, 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 beep. The sound was a nail gun in the small room. He's developing a tension pneumo, Jasmine said, her voice flat, her hands a blur as she slapped a blood pressure cuff on his arm. The mechanics were obvious. The broken ribs had punctured the lung, and now every breath he tried to take was just filling his chest cavity with air, crushing the good lung and his heart. I didn't ask for a diagnosis, nurse, Henderson snapped, his eyes not leaving the man's airway. Just do your job. Pierce made the incision, fumbling with the large bore tube. She was aiming too low, too far back. Jasmine watched, her stomach tightening into a cold knot. She's wrong. She's too low. She'll hit the liver or she'll miss the air pocket entirely and puncture the lung again. Look at the mechanics, not the machine. Her SOCM instructor's voice echoed in her head, clear as a bell. The patient is the problem. The monitor is just the noise. The man's trachea was deviating, being pushed to the side. The monitor was just a symptom. The mechanics were killing him. Jasmine couldn't stop herself. The words were out before her sense of self-preservation could catch them. Doctor, she said, her voice quiet, but sharp enough to cut through the alarms. You need to go higher. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular, and aim posterior. He's blowing a tension pneumo against the crushed ribs. The bay went utterly silent. Even the beep-beep-beep of the monitor seemed to fade. Dr. Pierce froze, her bloody glove hovering over the patient's chest. Dr. Marcus Henderson, who had just successfully intubated the patient, turned his head slowly. His eyes over the top of his blue paper mask were slits of pure, cold fury. Excuse me, Nurse Carter. His voice was lethally soft, more dangerous than any shout. He's crashing, Doctor, Jasmine pressed, gesturing to the monitor, which was now reading a saturation of 76 and falling. You're aiming too low, Nurse Carter, Henderson interrupted, his voice rising, every head in the trauma bay swiveling to watch. He stepped between Jasmine and the resident. He jabbed a gloved finger at the small plastic badge pinned to her scrubs. This says RN. It does not say MD. Since when did your 2-year nursing degree come with a surgical residency? You prep, you assist, and you keep your diagnoses to yourself. He shoved Jasmine's shoulder. Not hard, but it was a physical public dismissal, moving her away from the tray. Do not ever correct my resident again. Is that understood? He then turned to Pierce, guided her hand, and performed the exact maneuver Jasmine had just suggested. The tube went in, and with a sickening wet hiss of air, the patient's chest inflated. The monitor's alarm quieted, the numbers climbing. 83, 88, 92. Henderson looked at Jasmine, his expression one of pure, triumphant disdain. Now go get me a saline flush, unless you think you know a better way to do that too. The other nurses and residents quickly looked away, busying themselves. Jasmine Carter's jaw was so tight it ached. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the bed rail. You arrogant, petty bastard, you'd rather let him die for 30 seconds than be corrected by a nurse. She wanted to tell him that her 2-year degree was backed by a training program that made his residency look like a summer camp, that she had performed this exact procedure on a mountainside in a sandstorm using a multi-tool and a piece of sterilized plastic V-tubing. But she said nothing. This was her prison. This was the price of hiding. She just nodded, her eyes cold and empty. "Yes, doctor." She turned and walked away to the supply room. The humiliation, a hot metallic taste in her mouth, a world run by arrogant men who valued protocol over life, a place where she was forced to hide, forced to watch them fumble, forced to be small. They were still processing the victims from the I-85 pileup, the ER a controlled burn of activity, when a different alarm sounded. It wasn't the EMS squawk. It was a sharp digital trill from the direct line alert phone at the charge desk, the one that connected to Port Authority and unofficially to the nearby Fort Benning. Patricia Washington, who was coordinating beds upstairs, frowned and picked it up. Her hand went to her chest. The color drained from her face. "Code red," she announced to the room, her voice strained, cutting through the chaos. "Unidentified male, single patient, GSWs, multiple, high caliber, ETA 2 minutes. The brevity of the call was chilling. No details, no vitals, no mechanism of injury, just code red. It was a military designation. It meant shut up and prepare. "Henderson," Patricia yelled, already pointing. "You're up again. Bay 1 is almost clean. Carter, Pierce, get in there now." A different kind of tension snapped through the air. This wasn't a civilian tragedy. This was violence. Before the 2-minute mark hit, the ambulance bay doors slammed open again. But it wasn't a city ambulance. It was a black unmarked heavy-duty van, the kind with reinforced bumpers and tinted blast-resistant windows. The back doors flew open and 2 men jumped out. They weren't city paramedics in blue. They were dressed in black tactical gear. No logos, no patches, their faces grim. They moved with the same economical, terrifying grace that Jasmine herself possessed. They wheeled in a gurney, moving at a controlled run. Their boots made a hard, rhythmic thud, thud, thud on the linoleum. A sound that did not belong. A sound of the outside world invading the sterile box. "Trauma Bay 1. Where is it?" one of them barked. "Here," Henderson directed, stepping forward, his bravado from before slightly shaken. The man on the gurney was a ghost. He was pale, soaked in so much blood it looked black under the fluorescence. He was wearing shredded ballistic fibers and tactical gear that Jasmine recognized instantly, and he was covered in holes, dozens of small, dark, precise holes. "What is this? A gang war?" Dr. Marcus Henderson muttered, his eyes wide. Jasmine Carter froze. Her hands, which had been steady all night, began to tingle. The air in her lungs turned to ice. It wasn't the blood. It wasn't the wounds. It was the pattern. Oh, God, no, it can't be. Her SOCM training took over. Her mind wasn't a nurse's, it was an analyst's. The wounds weren't random. They were tight professional groupings. A plate dump. They hadn't been aiming center mass. They had been aiming at the edges of his ceramic body armor plates, the armpits, the groin, the neck, the gutter of the pelvis, places designed to shatter bone, sever arteries, and bleed a man out in minutes. This wasn't a shooting. This was a surgical execution attempt, a mobility kill. As they transferred him from their gurney to the hospital bed, a piece of equipment fell from his leg, a specialized windlass-style tourniquet. Jasmine knew it. It wasn't the standard-issue cat. It was a soft, favored by certain units. Her blood ran cold. This man wasn't a gangster. He was one of them. He was, or had been, one of her people. And he was dying. "Get them out of here," Henderson yelled at the 2 tactical medics who were lingering, their eyes hard and assessing everyone in the room. "He's one of," the taller one started, his hand on the pistol on his hip. "Out now. This is my trauma bay. I am in charge. Security." The 2 men shared a look. It was a look Jasmine knew. It was a look of transferring a high-value asset to an unsecured location. They were calculating in that split second whether Henderson was a threat or a resource. They decided he was an obstacle. The taller one nodded, and they vanished as silently as they had arrived. "Right," Henderson said, rubbing his hands together, trying to reclaim his authority. "Let's see what we've got." "This is a mess." He was staring at the sheer number of wounds, visibly overwhelmed. "Pierce, get me a fast scan. Carter, 2 large-bore IVs, and hang 10 units of O-negative. I want the rapid transfuser in here now." The man was an anatomical nightmare. He was bleeding from everywhere. The monitors screamed, a cascade of alarms so loud they blurred into one continuous shriek of failure. He had no palpable blood pressure. "I can't find a primary bleeder," Dr. Monica Pierce yelled, her voice cracking with panic. She jammed the fast ultrasound probe onto his abdomen, but the screen was a blizzard of static and shadow. "He's full of blood or fragments. I can't see anything. It's all black." "We've pumped 10 units into him, doctor," Jasmine shouted over the din, her hands a blur as she established a massive central line in his subclavian. The blood that came back was thin, like pink water. "It's coming out as fast as it's going in. He's in DIC. He's not clotting." The rapid transfuser, a machine the size of a small refrigerator, was whining, pumping bag after bag of O-negative blood into the man, but it was doing nothing. It was a futile effort, like trying to fill a bucket with a massive hole in the bottom. The smell of blood, coppery and metallic, was so thick it was suffocating. "Just hang the blood," Henderson commanded. He was sweating, his eyes darting around the room, looking for a solution for the wound, but there wasn't one. There were 30 or 40. He was looking for a textbook answer to a problem that had never been in a textbook. "He's arresting," Patricia yelled from the monitor. The flatline thrum filled the room, a solid, unbroken tone. "PA," Henderson stated, "pulseless electrical activity. The heart had electricity, but no mechanical function. He's too full of blood or he's too empty. Start compressions." A resident leaped onto a stool and began cracking the man's ribs, but it was useless. The patient had no circulating volume. Compressions were just pumping air. Dr. Marcus Henderson stared at the monitor, then at the man. He had followed every step of the advanced trauma life support protocol: airway, breathing, circulation, disability, exposure. He had done everything right. He had followed the book, and the patient was dead. This was conventionality failing. This was the book, the rules, and the hierarchy dissolving in a pool of O-negative blood. "Stop," Henderson said, his voice hollow. He stripped off his bloody gloves and threw them on the floor. "Stop compressions." The resident stopped, breathing hard, sweat dripping from his face. The only sound in the room was the drip, drip, drip of blood onto the floor and the steady monotone alarm of the monitor. "He has non-survivable injuries," Henderson declared, his voice catching slightly. He was a man watching his own limits. "We've done everything by the book. This is futile." He looked at the clock on the wall. "I'm calling it. Time of death, 23:47. Patricia Washington looked down, her pen hovering over the chart. Dr. Pierce slumped against the wall, her face as pale as the patient's, and quietly began to cry. The room deflated. Jasmine Carter stood by the rapid transfuser, watching. "Time of death," Henderson had said. A memory flashed hot and sharp, searing the inside of her skull. It wasn't a memory. It was a haunting. A dusty, blood-soaked bunker in Kandahar, the air thick with pulverized concrete and the smell of cordite, a young private, a kid named Rodriguez, his legs blown off by an IED, his monitor showing the exact same PEA rhythm. Colonel Harrison's voice crackling over the radio. "He's expectant, Carter. His injuries are non-survivable. Fall back to the perimeter. That's a direct order. We are being overrun." She had looked at the colonel. She had looked at the dying private, and she had made a choice. "Negative, sir. He's not expectant. He's just bleeding." She had disobeyed. She had shoved her hand into the private's shredded groin, found the femoral artery with her fingers, and refused to let go. Not when they were dragged onto the helicopter. Not for the entire 40-minute flight. She had saved his life and ended her career in the same defiant instant. Non-survivable. The words echoed in the sterile trauma bay. Henderson was Colonel Harrison. Arrogant by the book. Wrong. "Stop." Jasmine's voice wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. It cut through the sterile silence of the bay like a gunshot. Dr. Henderson turned, his face already slick with sweat, darkening with rage. "Nurse Carter, you are dismissed from this trauma. I am calling it. Get out now." "You're calling it because you're looking for one wound," Jasmine said. She was moving, her feet carried her forward, her body acting on an instinct deeper than thought. She walked directly to the gurney, her eyes not on Henderson, but on the patient. She was scanning his body like a schematic. "You're wrong. He doesn't have a primary bleeder. He has 3, and he is not in PEA because he's empty. He's in obstructive shock. His pericardium is full. That's impossible, Henderson sputtered, stepping in her way, trying to physically block her. The ultrasound was clear. The ultrasound is useless. It's clotted, she snapped. Her mind was gone. The nurse was gone. The SOCM was in control. It's a cardiac tamponade masked by the hypovolemia. You can't see it. You have to feel it. Before Dr. Marcus Henderson or the two bewildered security guards at the door could react, Jasmine Carter's hand shot out and seized a 10-blade scalpel from the tray. "Security! Stop her! She's hysterical! She's in shock!" Henderson screamed, lunging for her. Jasmine shoved the resident Dr. Pierce backward into Henderson, clearing her space. "Don't touch me!" Her voice was a low growl, an animalistic sound that did not belong to the 23-year-old nurse, and then she cut. It wasn't a nurse's movement. It was a single, fluid, violent act of precision. She made a long, rapid incision from the man's sternal notch straight down to his gyphoid process. It was a procedure she was not licensed, certified, or insured to even contemplate. It was a field-expedient thoracotomy. "You're insane! You'll be in prison!" Henderson howled, scrambling to his feet. Patricia Washington stifled a scream, her hand flying to her mouth. Dr. Pierce was openly sobbing. Jasmine ignored them. She dropped the scalpel and grabbed the trauma shears. "Crack the sternum," she muttered to herself, reciting the steps. She jammed the shears under the bone and squeezed with all her strength. A sickening, wet crunch echoed in the room, a sound of bone and cartilage giving way. The two security guards finally grabbed her shoulders. "Ma'am, you have to stop. Step away!" Jasmine roared, a sound that was not human, a sound from the battlefield, from the back of a burning helicopter. "Get off me, or I swear!" She shrugged them off with a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength that shocked them. She plunged her gloved hands into the man's open chest cavity. The sensation was immediate, familiar. She was immersed in warm, slick blood. She felt the spongy, useless give of the lungs. Her fingers found the heart. It was just as she'd thought. It was hard, tense, not beating, just quivering like a trapped bird against the terrible, unyielding pressure of the sack surrounding it. "Tamponade!" she hissed. She felt for the phrenic nerve, her fingers mapping the anatomy by touch alone. "Clear!" She snatched the scalpel again. Slice. She sliced open the pericardial sac. A geyser of dark clotted blood erupted from the chest, spattering her face, her mask, and the wall behind her. It was a full liter of old blood, thick as jelly. And on the monitor, the flat line broke. Beep. A pause. Beep, beep. A slow, thready but functional sinus rhythm appeared. The man's body shuddered on the gurney, taking a single ragged breath. "He's back," Jasmine gasped, her entire body shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline. "But he's not stable." She shoved her hand deeper into his chest, past the now beating heart. Her fingers found the massive pulsing tube of the descending aorta. "Manual aortic cross-clamp," Davis's voice again. "It's a killer cure. You buy them 5 minutes. Make them count." She clamped her fingers around it, cutting off all blood flow to the lower body. "Patricia, get the blood pumping. Full bore." She looked up, her face a mask of blood, her eyes burning with an authority that silenced the room. She locked eyes with the paralyzed, humiliated chief of trauma surgery. "Dr. Henderson," she commanded, "he has a transected subclavian artery and a massive liver laceration. I'm stopping the bleed out from his lower body, but I can't reach the subclavian. It's high in the chest. You have to stop that bleed now or he'll arrest again." Dr. Marcus Henderson was paralyzed, staring at a 23-year-old black nurse with her hand inside a man's chest, giving him orders. He was staring at the impossible rhythm on the monitor. The patient had a blood pressure. It was low, 68/38, but it was there. "Doctor," Jasmine Carter said, her voice softer but no less firm, "get in here. Save your patient." Shaken, ashamed, and terrified, Dr. Marcus Henderson stepped forward. He picked up a vascular clamp from the tray. He looked at Jasmine, his eyes wide. She nodded. "Up and to the left, under the clavicle. Go." And following her direction, he did. 2 hours later, the patient, now stabilized and in the surgical ICU, was alive. Dr. Marcus Henderson, operating on pure adrenaline and a profound bone-deep shame, had successfully repaired the subclavian artery while another surgical team packed the liver. He had, in the end, done his job, but only after being led there by the nose. Jasmine Carter, sat in a hard plastic chair in the hospital's human resources office. The sun was starting to come up, painting the gray Atlanta sky in shades of bruised purple and pink. The fluorescent lights of the office felt too bright, too accusing. The air smelled of bad coffee and ozone from the copier. Her scrubs were gone, incinerated. She was in a set of dull green hospital issue ones, but she still felt stained. The hospital administrator, a legal representative, and Dr. Marcus Henderson were all present. Henderson wouldn't look at her. He just stared at his hands, which were clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Jasmine Carter," the administrator said, his voice flat. "Your actions in the trauma bay this evening were, to put it mildly, outside the scope of your practice." "She saved his life," Patricia Washington said, standing in the doorway. She hadn't been invited, but she was here. Her face was set in a stubborn, protective line. "That is irrelevant, Patricia," the lawyer said smoothly, not even looking at her. "She performed a field-expedient thoracotomy without a medical license. It was gross insubordination, reckless endangerment, and a lawsuit of catastrophic proportions had the patient not survived." Dr. Henderson finally spoke, his voice thick, heavy. He stared at his hands. "Her actions were barbaric, unjustifiable. She assaulted my resident. She threatened security. What she did was not medicine. It was butchery." Jasmine looked at him, a cold, dead feeling spreading through her chest. "You coward." He knew. He knew she had been right. He knew that butchery was the only thing that had saved the man, but he couldn't admit it. He couldn't admit that the nurse he'd humiliated had saved his patient and his reputation. "The patient is alive, doctor," Jasmine said, her voice void of emotion. "Coincidentally," Henderson shot back, his eyes finally meeting hers, and they were filled with a hateful, terrified resentment. The administrator slid a piece of paper and a pen across the desk. "Your employment at Grady Memorial is terminated, effective immediately. Sign this. It's a severance agreement contingent on you signing an NDA about this evening's events. We will not press charges or report this to the nursing board if you sign." Jasmine Carter felt nothing, just a vast, cold numbness. It was the same as before. You save the life, you lose the job. That was the choice, and she always made the same choice. It was the only choice she knew how to make. She picked up the pen, signed the papers, and stood up. She didn't look at any of them. She walked out of the office, past a stunned Patricia Washington, and down the hall to the locker room. The squeak of the cheap metal door was the only sound. She pulled out her few belongings, a worn-out pair of running shoes, and a spare hoodie. She was a ghost. She had never really been here at all. She walked out the back exit of the hospital into the pre-dawn chill. The humidity had finally broken, but the air was heavy and damp, smelling of wet asphalt in the nearby city. She pulled up the hood of her sweatshirt and started walking toward the bus stop. She'd nowhere else to go. A black sedan with dark-tinted windows and government plates pulled up silently beside her. The passenger window glided down. "Jasmine Carter," a woman's voice said. She was sharp, wearing a suit that cost more than Jasmine's car. "I'm not in the mood," she said, not breaking her stride. "A field-expedient thoracotomy with a manual aortic cross-clamp," the woman said, opening her door and falling into step beside her. She held a black umbrella, though it wasn't raining. "You won't find that in any nursing textbook." Jasmine stopped dead. The sound of the distant freeway seemed to fade. "But it is on page 413 of the Special Operations Combat Medic Advanced Trauma Manual," the woman finished. Jasmine turned slowly. The woman was in her 40s with cold, analytical eyes. "My name is Agent Lisa Mitchell," she said. Another door opened, and a man, Agent David Reynolds, stepped out from the car's shadow. He was silent, just watching, his eyes taking in everything. "We saw the security footage from the trauma bay," Reynolds said, his voice quiet, "and the footage of your discharge." "Your file says you washed out of the third group," Mitchell said, closing her umbrella with a neat snap. "Discharged for insubordination, saving a private against a direct order to fall back, wasn't it?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Jasmine lied, but her voice was weak. The words were a hollow reflex. Agent Lisa Mitchell smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "The man you saved, the private whose life you chose over your career, That was Colonel Harrison's nephew, the same Colonel Harrison who gave the order to fall back. You saved the kid, but you proved the colonel's order was cowardly. You embarrassed him, and the brass hates being embarrassed. Jasmine's world tilted. The numbness that had protected her cracked, and a white-hot, clarifying rage flooded in. He had me blacklisted. He buried me here. It wasn't a question. He couldn't court-martial you, Mitchell said. You were a hero. The kid's uncle was a congressman, so Harrison did the next best thing. He buried you in the one place you'd be too bored and too broken to ever be a problem again. He was wrong. The man on that table, Agent Reynolds said, stepping forward. The one you just saved, his call sign is Watchman. He's the team leader for a new operational detachment. Jasmine stared at her. What? What does that have to do with me? Mitchell looked at her, her cold eyes finally showing a glimmer of something. Respect. His primary mission tonight, Miss Carter, was to find and recruit you. The breath left Jasmine's lungs. He was coming for me. He got compromised by a rival cell on his way to make contact, Reynolds said. They knew he was here for a medic. They just didn't know who. You didn't just save a patient, Miss Carter. You saved your own extraction team, and in doing so, you confirmed exactly what we hoped to see. We don't care about hospital protocols. We don't care about Dr. Henderson's ego. We care about results. Agent Lisa Mitchell walked to the back door of the sedan and opened it. The interior was dark, quiet, and smelled of clean leather and something metallic like a gun safe. Dr. Henderson fired you from a job you hate, she said. I'm offering you the one you were trained for. The Watchman team is stable, but they're still in country and they need their medic. The real one. Jasmine Carter looked back at the grime-covered institutional green walls of Grady Memorial Hospital. She thought of the buzzing lights, the smell of wax, the petty tyrannies of Dr. Marcus Henderson. She thought of the hollow, empty feeling of being a ghost, a scalpel used to open mail. Then she looked into the dark, quiet interior of the car. It wasn't a prison. It was a gateway. It was the world that had made her, the world that understood her, the world that had finally come back for her.